everybody, to a timely 10 edition of Burn Your Boat's Wealth. I am flying solo today as Clark Lunt. And today, everyone, I have kind of a hot take. For a while now, let's say the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, certainly the flavor of the day has been BRRRR, okay? And if you don't know what BRRRR is, it's essentially, it's just an acronym for if you buy the property, right, you renovate the property, you rent the property, and then you refinance the property, okay? And that has been something that you'll hear all these stories about people that were able to buy it and they were able to borrow, take hard money, and hard money being kind of like a short-term loan because you're buying like a distressed property that needs a bunch of work, and then you put the work into it, it grows in value, you go back to a traditional bank, and they give you, usually they'll give you 70 cents on the dollar for the appraised value. And a lot of times you've built in that much equity to where you can basically get out of the deal with very little money out of your pocket. Okay. And everyone wins and they talk about, well, I've got this much equity in the property and I didn't have any money in my pocket. Right. But here's this thing that you don't hear a lot is what happens 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, right? You don't hear the second chapter to that story. So today I'm going to talk about why I feel like that if you're getting out, starting on your journey and you've got 0 properties or 1 or 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5, that's kind of who I want to talk to today is the folks that have probably less than 5 rental properties. I don't think you should be burring. I don't think you should be doing that method because what you're doing is you're almost kind of selling your soul. Okay. So what do I mean by that? First off, why do you care what I have to say about this, right? The reason why I feel like I have some credibility on this is because I have been spending time in the market, not timing the market. Okay. So if you talk to a lot of real estate investors, they started their journey 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? Well, what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years? Everything has exploded, right? Anything you bought in 2020 or 2019, you look like you're a rock star, right? Because you couldn't, because it just the market exploded, it went up, rents went up. And so you look like a genius, right? The thing is that I bought my first property in 2006. I bought my next one in 2008, then in 2009, 2010, right? So I have been able to see the differences in the properties that I bought like on the MLS where I didn't BRRRR. And then I've been able to see properties that I did do the BRRRR method where I bought the beat up property, that the ugly house that everyone shows on social media where they come in and fix it up, right? And I've been able to see over the years how those properties have evolved. Have they done well? Have the rents increased? Have the quality of the tenants increased? Have I had a lot of repairs? Have I not had a lot of repairs? And I've been able to kind of see and analyze like what worked and what didn't, right? I don't care who you are. If you bought something in 2022, it's very difficult to look out 7, 8, 10 years to see how you're going to project to do. It's not easy, right? So I feel like I have a unique perspective because I can look back at properties about 12 years ago to see how they actually performed, right? So I told you what a BRRRR was, right? You're buying a junky house, essentially, a lot of times, right? Then you're having to do a fair amount of renovation. Then you once it's fixed up, you rent it and you refinance it, right? Well, why don't people just buy a conventional loan? Why would you do this process, right? Well, usually when you're buying a distressed asset, you can't get a conventional loan. Wells Fargo is not going to give you a loan. Chase Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank is not going to give you a loan on a beat up property. It's going to have to pass inspections and things like that, right? So why is the BRRRR method? Why am I saying out loud that I don't think that the BRRRR method is good, especially when your first 4 or 5 deals that you're buying that you want to hold as rentals? Well, number one is that the BRRRR method means you have to buy the property at a discount. Okay. Now, why wouldn't you want to buy a property at a discount? Well, the only way typically 80, 90% of the time to buy a discounted property is when the condition of the property is subpar, right? It's not in good condition. It's old. It's got old plumbing. It's got old wiring. It's got old roofs. It's got grandma's kitchen, all of that stuff, right? So it kind of means that you have a decision to make when you buy these. Is sometimes, that old plumbing, you maybe want to hold on to that old plumbing because it still works, right? So you tend to put Band-Aids on things when you do BRRRR. Maybe you put in the new kitchen, maybe you put on the new roof, but you tend to Band-Aid certain things that are going to come back and bite you in the ass later. Now remember, this is something that may not bite you in the ass in the first year, 2 or 3 that you have the property, but 7, 8, 10, 12 years down the line, now you're replumbing the whole house, you're digging into the concrete slab, and now that investment doesn't look quite as good as you thought it was going to be, right? The second thing on a BRRRR is that it's all based on cash flow, right? It's all based on the amount of rent you get versus the mortgage payment, right? So you want to be able to show on paper to the lender that you're going to get $1,500 a month rent and your mortgage payment is going to be $1,100, right? So it's all based on that. So what happens? It tends to push you into lower quality neighborhoods because on paper, the C class, the D class neighborhoods are always going to look better on a spreadsheet than buying in a B or an A class neighborhood, right? So you're buying, you're buying properties on cash flow. Okay, you're buying older distressed properties, but then you get to potentially get all your money back, right? So there's a chance that once you fix it up, you build enough equity in the property and you get all your money back, right? Isn't that a great thing, right? I don't have very much money in the deal. Well, all of that is wonderful in a market that continues to incline, right? So it tends to go up, it tends to appreciate. Rents go up, the appreciation of the property goes up. But what happens if the rents don't go up? What happens if the values actually drop a little bit? Okay. We're coming into this new market where rents are softening. They're not going up. Okay. The appreciation of these properties is minimal to zero. And in some markets, it's probably dropping a little bit. So what does all that mean? It means that you're BRRRRing these properties. A BRRRR is almost like it's enabling you. It's kind of making it easy for you to go into lower quality neighborhoods, lower quality construction, which will produce lower quality tenants, which is going to produce less appreciation over a period of time. Okay. So in an increasing market, hey, it's fine, right? Because things are going up. But now that we're in a decreasing market or a stagnant market, it tends to showcase the weaknesses in this approach to buying. So here, what do I think you should do? Okay. Again, if you're starting out, I'm talking to the people that are in the 1 to 5 space in terms of buying the rental properties is, you know, let's talk about the other side of the coin. So you go out, you buy a $300,000 house, okay? You put 20% down, okay? That $300,000 house, okay, and if you're in San Diego, of course, the $300,000 house isn't gonna buy you anything. That's the extreme, right? If you're in Manhattan, $300,000 doesn't buy you anything, right? But in most of the country, if you spent $300,000 on a piece of property, it should be able to at least get you into a starter neighborhood, okay? A neighborhood that you would feel comfortable living in, and a neighborhood you would feel comfortable putting your mother into, okay? So I'm gonna give you an example of what I did to say, okay, don't do the BRRRR method. Don't go buy the ugly house on the block, okay? Don't buy the one that you're trying to get the most equity in. Because remember, we are buying this to hold. We are time in the market, not timing the market, okay? So at the end of 10 years, you're gonna look back, and whether you bought that property for 300 or 260 or 310 is gonna be a little bit irrelevant. So here's what I did. Let's talk meat and potatoes. I said, okay, I'm going to go on, and you can have your local realtor do this, or if you have access to the MLS. And I went on and said, okay, I'm going to go into my backyard. I live in Tampa, Florida. I'm going to search for 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses, okay, which is the most common, probably requested type of house, where you can get a family, you can get roommates, you can get all of that stuff, right? They're going to be less transient tenants because they're going to look at it more like a home. And I went to Tampa, Florida, and I said, okay, give me all 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses that are south of 300,000. Okay. And after I filtered that out, I took out condos, I took out townhouses, I took out anything with an HOA. And I said, how many were there? There was 10 houses. Okay. In Tampa, Florida, under 300,000 that were at least a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Okay. Said, great. Then I went in and I started looking at each one on a map. And I said, you know, if you're buying in your backyard, here's the advantage to buying in your backyard is, you know, the good areas, you know, the areas that aren't as good, and you know, the areas that are just war zones that you would never want to go into, right? So I said, okay, I found 2 or 3 houses that were in areas that I feel like are gentrifying. They're moving in the right direction. Cool stuff is coming in. They're building A-class commercial within a mile vicinity. And I looked at the first one I found. They had listed at 300,000. Okay. And they had been on the market 110 days. Okay. I looked at the history, and they had started it way higher, and they kept dropping. And I said, okay, this property is beautiful. It's beautifully renovated, new kitchen, new bathroom. It looks like they came in and basically gutted the house. Okay. And it's been on the market a long time now, which is just a result of the market we're in, where there's almost more buyers now than sellers. Okay. And I said, all right, I like this house. I like this neighborhood. I would live in this house. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. There's going to be people. But how much will it rent for and how much will my mortgage payment be? If I buy this traditionally, okay, I'm not burying it, I'm not closing on it twice and paying twice the closing costs. What if I just bought this property with 20% down on a normal conventional loan and I bought it as like a second house or an investment property, and I put in a 6.5% interest rate, which is the current interest rate as the time that I'm recording this podcast. Okay, and I put in 6.5. The interest or the mortgage payment, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance was about $2,100. Okay, so $2,100. So if it's 7%, maybe it's $2,200, $2,250. It's a little bit less. So you're anywhere between say 2,000 and 2,200 all in for your mortgage payment. Okay. Then I said, well, how much can I rent this property for? So I went to Zillow and I said, Zillow, I plugged in the address. I want a 3.2. What's the market rent for my property if I were to buy it? And I noticed that if I wanted to rent in that same neighborhood for 25 or for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, the rentals started at 2,500 and went up to 3,500. So that is the market as of today that I'm looking at. So in conclusion, if I buy this property for about 280,000, it's fully fixed up. I put 20% down. There's no jujitsu. I'm not trying to play chess here. Remember, I'm just trying to buy quality assets and just sit on them and let a tenant pay it down. Okay. I put my 20% down. I leave that 20% equity in the property. Okay. So as it goes up, I'm not there to try and tap into that and refinance ASAP. It is okay to leave equity in properties to some reasonable amount. You don't have to pull out every single dime and risk everything. And the minute that the faucet breaks, you have to pull into your own back pocket, right? It is okay to leave equity in a property and then be able to actually cash flow enough to where it makes sense. So in my conclusion, I spent 4 minutes looking at the MLS and looking at Zillow rents, and I found within 4 minutes a perfectly well rehabbed 3-bedroom, 2-bath property in a nice neighborhood close to a lot of things. A lot of gentrification is happening where I could buy it for 275 to 280. Okay, I would put down my 20%. So let's just use 300,000 for even numbers. That's $60,000 plus closing costs. Okay, so 60,000 bucks. I'm buying this property. I'm leaving my $60,000 in the property, right? That's my equity. My mortgage payment, let's say, is $2,100, and let's say I could rent it for $2,600, $2,700. Would you do that deal, right? That doesn't take a lot of chess playing. That is just playing checkers. It is okay right now to play checkers. All right. You do not have to overanalyze everything and look at cap rates. All I know is that I can buy this property and pay $2,100 a month, and I can get a tenant to pay me $2,600 minus fees. Worst case scenario is I do have to fix a faucet every once in a while and I break even. Best case scenario is I make $300 or $400 a month. Okay. But I'm not having to buy it and fix it up and jump through a bunch of hoops and then refinance it and pay twice the closing costs. Do not feel like you have to do all that. It complicates things. And what it does is it keeps people from ever even starting. Okay. And that is the worst thing that can happen. So if you can take something away from this, everyone, is that if you go to your market, right, and you don't live in San Francisco, this isn't going to work. If you live in Salt Lake City, more than likely it can, but markets where you can get starter houses in the 250 to probably 450 range, which is a lot of markets across the United States and a lot of good quality markets. There are ability now with deals to be able to buy these things and just look at what the rent market value is in that specific neighborhood to be able to cover your costs. And you just put 20% down and you just chill out. Okay. You're not worrying about tapping into that equity in 2 years because it went up by 10%. Who cares? That is okay, because there's a lot to be said for having equity in properties that you have happy tenants. And when the faucet breaks, you're making enough cash flow to where it's okay to then pull out of that cash flow to fix the faucet, maybe even do some upgrades, right? Maybe even you've got reserves to fix that AC. If you're constantly burying everything and pulling every single dime out of there, every time the faucet breaks, you're going to lose sleep at night, because now you're going to be losing money and you're going to be pulling money out of your pocket. Okay. So again, I'm talking to the person that is just kind of getting started. Maybe they own 1 or 2 rentals. Okay. Maybe they own 3 or 4, but stop trying to enable and get pushed into these bad neighborhoods where you can get the quote unquote discounted properties. that is going to keep you from growing, because you're going to build a portfolio, and you're going to be building a slumlord type portfolio. And that's not what you want to do. I look back at my first 5 properties I bought. They were all on the MLS. Okay. They were all in neighborhoods that I would live in. Okay. And then ironically, as soon as I started buying properties cash, guess what happened? All those properties were in bad neighborhoods. They were old. They needed a ton of work. I band-aided some of the work, and it came back to bite me in the ass later. Do not let that happen to you. Please go out and just buy with 20% down on a conventional loan. It will force you to buy better houses in better neighborhoods that are in better quality condition, which will then reward you with better tenants. It will reward you with not having to fix as much stuff down the road. And ultimately, you're going to have a much more well built out portfolio that'll be much more attractive if you want to sell it later, or if you want to start playing chess. So moral of the story, stop trying to play chess when you're buying your first rental property or your second rental property. Go out, put 20% down on a nice, well maintained property, and just chill. Just enjoy it. Just sit back, enjoy that Mai Tai on the beach, save up more money, and then rinse and repeat down the road without having to play chess with everything. So hope this helped, guys. This is something I hear all the time, where it's like I hear someone that says, I bought my first rental, I squeezed all the money out of it. What should I do now? And it's like, stop squeezing all the equity out of your property. It's okay to have a little bit of equity, because it's a little bit of padding, because God forbid the rental market drops and that $2,500 a month rent drops to $2,000 a month rent. It's not the end of the world. But just imagine if you finance it and your payment was even higher, right? So now you're coming out of pocket $300 or $400 instead of $50 a month. That's all I got for you today. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope this helped. And go out there and start taking action today. See you guys. Cheers. Well, that is a wrap for today, folks. We hope that this episode shed some light on the complexities of the real estate market and kind of really gave you some actionable insights. Because remember, you navigate the world of property investment, it requires more than just luck. You're going to need strategy, you're going to need knowledge, and of course, you're going to need a little dash of courage. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review on any of the podcast platforms that you listen to, and YouTube as well. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Burn Your Boats Wealth, and leave comments. Talk to us about things that you want us to talk about or things you disagree with us on. We appreciate all that type of insight. Your support really fuels our fire to bring you even more valuable content. So we appreciate you. We appreciate the support, and we will see you next time.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats Wealth podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at contact@burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats Wealth podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you and have a great day.